Part 30. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 293. Colin, is this suitable for me to wear to the palace dinner later? Vera asks sweetly after changing her clothes, pacing to her husband's side. Colin's eyes suddenly lit up. Vera chose a black off-shoulder corset dress with black silk stockings and silver stilettos, which highlighted her white and smooth complexion, making her look mysterious, noble, sexy, and elegant. You will definitely become the focus of the party, my dear. Vera's lover's praise made Vera elated, her pretty face flushed, her fair hands smoothly placed on Colin's shoulders, and she gently pushed him to the sofa chair, taking the initiative to give a long and affectionate kiss. After some tenderness, Vera lay obediently on Colin's chest, enjoying the caress of her lover. While rubbing circles on Vera's smooth back, Colin asked, "Tell me, when will His Majesty receive you?" Vera squinted her eyes comfortably, like a lazy kitten, fascinated. He said vaguely, "I should be able to see your Majesty at the banquet tonight." Colin chuckled, shook his head, and said, "I feel that your Majesty still won't show up at the banquet tonight." "Why?" Vera said. Only then did he open his eyes, which were still a little blurry. Intuition. Colin's tone was a little solemn. "I'm afraid this trip to Yolong City will not go as smoothly as I expected." "Okay, don't think about it. I'll help you change clothes, okay?" "Okay." Vera comforted her softly. "Beautiful lady, this is my honor." Colin stopped thinking and got up from the sofa with Vera in his arms. "Then you have to listen to my instructions and don't rush me. I just hope I won't be late. Just be calm, and we won't be late." After more than 2 hours of tossing, the two of them finished cleaning up. At this time, Vera's pretty face was flushed, and she was panting. It seemed that helping Colin choose clothes was indeed a big project. Afterward, the two of them boarded the carriage that had been waiting outside the palace and headed to the Phoenix Palace for the banquet. The splendid banquet hall had already raised crystal candlestick chandeliers, and hundreds of imperial nobles gathered together, creating a lively atmosphere. As expected by Colin, Emperor Reinhard still did not show up. The banquet was hosted by Queen Midla. Perhaps because Vera is not the Duke of the North after all, the standards of this welcome banquet are not top-notch, and the real big shot in attendance is Queen Midla. His Majesty the Emperor, Prince Lek, the Imperial Prime Minister, the 5 consuls of the Senate, etc., were not present. Colin knew that one of the 5 consuls of the Senate was from the St. Hilda family and was Vera's great-uncle in terms of seniority. Unexpectedly, he did not even appear at the welcome banquet. Haha, that's really interesting. After some toasts, the grand welcome banquet officially began. Colin no longer worried about the current situation in the imperial capital, and now concentrated on dealing with the delicacies on the table. He was not very familiar with these big bosses who stood at the top of the empire. Bachelor Don went to visit the Prime Minister of the Empire, and Colin planned to wait for him to come back before discussing the current situation with him. The steamed sea bass with lemon tastes very good, the pan-fried giant rhinoceros ribs are also very chewy, the lettuce mixed with butter is also refreshing and delicious, and drinking champagne without origin or vintage is intoxicating. Except for the fact that there is no deer blood wine, Colin is very excited about the banquet. "I was very satisfied with the meal. It seems that the palace chef really knows his stuff." When the candles in the crystal candlesticks were about to burn out, Queen Midla announced that the dinner was over, and the guests returned to their respective lounges, asking the palace attendants to clear away the dining tables and chairs, replace the candles, lay down carpets, and decorate the dance scene. When everything was ready, the guests returned to the hall. The melodious melody sounded immediately, and the dance officially began. Colin hugged Vera, danced the first dance, and then planned to invite Queen Midla. not only to express his gratitude to her for preparing this welcome banquet but also to take this opportunity to test the attitude of the Emperor who has not appeared for a long time. However, what Colin didn't expect was that someone would interfere. "Viscount Angelet, can I invite you to the next dance?" I saw Princess Judy standing in front of Colin. She was wearing a snow-white petal gauze dress, a princess laurel crown on her head, and a milky white face. Flushes appeared on his face. "Of course, it's my honor," Colin could only respond politely. It's not what a gentleman should do to refuse a dance invitation from a lady, let alone a young lady. Colin held Judy's little hand and stepped onto the red carpet dance floor, while the melodious harp played brisk music. Princess Judy is 11 years old, about 1.4 meters tall, and looks slim, but Colin still has to kneel down to cooperate with her in the court dance. "Viscount Angelet, Brother Harrison told me that you are good at telling stories," Princess Judy whispered in Colin's ear. Colin guided the little girl to spin slowly on the dance floor. Hearing this, he smiled lightly and said, "Prince Harrison is so complimentary." At the same time, he felt a little confused. Judging from Prince Harrison's reaction when he saw Colin earlier, Colin should have left a big psychological shadow on him. How could he praise him for being able to tell stories? While he was thinking wildly, Colin suddenly felt a weight on his foot, and then heard Princess Judy's apology. "Ah, I'm sorry, Viscount Angelet, I accidentally stepped on you." "It's okay," Colin smiled. "And didn't care. Can you tell me a story when you have time?" Princess Judy said coquettishly. Actually, my story is not suitable for children." Colin was trying to push it off, but then he noticed another heavy weight on his foot. "Ah, I'm sorry, Viscount Angelet, I stepped on you again." Colin lowered his head and saw a pretty face full of apology and innocence. However, Colin no longer felt that the other party was unintentional. "Her Royal Highness, your court dance still needs more practice." "Yes, how about you teach me?" "Your Royal Highness, you think too highly of me. I am not qualified to be your dance teacher." "Viscount Angelet, you are so polite, I think you can dance even better than my current dance teacher." While speaking, Princess Judy almost accidentally stepped on Colin several times, but she was always stopped by Colin. Escape without leaving a trace. With Colin's reaction and speed as a 5th level knight, it was really easy to avoid being stepped on by a little girl. However, Princess Judy was very persistent. She kept poking out her glass slippers from under her skirt as if she would never give up until she stepped on them. The expressions on her face were sometimes annoyed, sometimes angry, and sometimes gnashing her teeth. She completely lost her cute disguise before, revealing her quirky nature. Colin smiled and said nothing, elegantly avoiding Princess Judy's stampede. At the same time, she did not forget to tease, "Your Highness, your rhythm is messed up." "Humph." Princess Judy ignored Colin and continued her great cause of stepping on feet with concentration. At this time, the dance became clumsy and not graceful at all. The surrounding audience also noticed the clues and smiled. Obviously they all understood Princess Judy's temper. Seeing that she couldn't hit Colin no matter what, Princess Judy was so anxious that she almost cried. Her pitiful appearance made people feel very distressed. However, Colin would not be fooled. He guessed that this little girl was probably acting again. As if to see that Colin was not fooled, Princess Judy rolled her eyes and suddenly said, "Viscount Angelet, do you know why father did not attend the dinner?" Colin's eyes narrowed and he asked curiously, "Why?" However, Princess Judy smiled proudly but did not answer. Colin understood. He could only sigh, no longer dodge, and let Princess Judy step on his feet hard. The little girl suddenly smiled, as if she had won some great victory. While she crushed Colin's feet twice, she whispered, "Because father is sick." Sick, Colin's heart suddenly thought, and he was about to continue asking, but the music stopped at this moment. Princess Judy held her little head high, gathered up her skirt, curtsied to Colin, and then walked away. Judging from the fact that she was running towards Prince Harrison, she was probably going to show off to her brother. Colin shook his head with a smile and then saw Queen Midla walking over. Tonight, she wore a palace-style purple low-cut corset dress, revealing her round shoulders and large snow-white chest. The exquisite tailoring skills vividly outline the perfect body curves. Her long blonde hair was pulled into a lady's bun. The willow waist is swaying lightly, graceful, and the dignified and charming style makes Colin temporarily absent-minded. Sorry, Viscount Angelette, Judy is a little naughty. Colin smiled slightly and said, No, Her Royal Highness the Princess is very cute. The music sounded again, and Queen Midla smiled and stretched out her left hand. Colin quickly stepped forward, hugged the Queen's slender waist, and began to sway to the music. End of chapter. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 294. Accompanied by the melodious melody, Colin put his arms around Queen Midla's slender waist and danced on the gorgeously patterned carpet. Within the framework of court dance, the dancing men and women appear to be hugging each other, but in fact this is just an illusion caused by the perspective. Except for their arms, no other body parts of the two people are in contact. Only between lovers, or husbands and wives, will the abdomens be closely attached to each other. Of course, Colin would not be rude to Queen Midla, but unexpectedly, the Queen took the initiative to stick to her. Feeling the softness and warmth on his lower abdomen, Colin's mind remained calm. Judy has been learning to dance since she was a child, but she has a bad habit of stepping on her feet. This is not deliberately aimed at you. I hope you don't take it to heart. Queen Midla breathed into her ear and said softly. The lazy tone and moist breath constantly stirred Colin's heart. It's also an honor to be stepped on by a beautiful lady, Colin responded with a smile. At the same time, he also remembered that Queen Midla had stepped on him at the dance in Silver Moon City. Well, it seems like a mother, like a daughter. I don't know if she also thought of this matter, but a blush appeared on Queen Midla's pretty face. Colin led Queen Midla in a quick spin. The purple dress bloomed like flowers, and the seductive scenery under the skirt flashed away. I heard that His Majesty is ill. Colin suddenly said this, waking up Queen Midla, who was intoxicated by the melodious dance music. The Queen's eyes flashed, she glanced at Colin and said with a sweet smile, "Where did you get the news?" Colin did not speak, he would not expose a little girl. But judging from Queen Midla's performance, this news should be true. No wonder Emperor Reinhard never showed up. Seeing that Colin was unwilling to disclose the source of the information, Queen Midla did not ask further questions and nodded, "Yes, His Majesty is indeed ill, but you don't have to worry, he should be fine soon. In addition, I hope you don't want to hear this news. After all, rumors can easily cause unnecessary panic." "I understand." Colin nodded and then asked, "What do you think of the heir to the Duke of the North?" Queen Midra's face changed. He had to be serious and said softly, "Don't be anxious. Your Majesty and I both hope to see Vera inherit the position of Duke of the North. What's more, you still have the will of the previous Duke of the North, so relax and wait for a while. When the time comes, I will naturally arrange for you to meet His Majesty." Queen Midla's comforting words not only made Colin feel relieved but also made him more aware that something was wrong with the current situation in the imperial capital. Moreover, he also noticed that the Queen said wait for the time to come instead of wait for His Majesty to recover from the illness. This made Colin couldn't help but wonder whether His Majesty the Emperor was not too ill to see guests now, but just that the timing is wrong and you don't want to meet Vera? "Your Majesty, of course I am willing to follow your arrangements." Although he was full of doubts in his heart, Colin would definitely not question the Queen's decision. After all, we are not in Winter City now, but in Dragon City. The St. Hilda family does not have much power to rely on here, and Vera's aunt Queen Midla is definitely the most important person. Of course, Colin would not completely trust this beautiful queen. She was Vera's aunt, yes, but she was also Joyce's aunt. Colin had no way of knowing which side her heart was on. Seeing that Colin was so obedient, the smile on Queen Midra's face became brighter and brighter, and she spoke again. By the way, there is one more thing you should pay attention to. Please tell me. Don't believe Saba's St. Hill, Germany. Huh, Colin's heart suddenly jumped, and he almost jumped to the wrong beat, but fortunately, he adjusted it in time. Saba's St. Hilda is Vera's great-uncle and the consul of the Imperial Senate. There are 5 consuls in the Imperial Senate, each of whom is served by senators from the 5 major paladin families. The 5 consuls take turns serving as presidents of the Senate every month and are responsible for presiding over the meetings of the Senate that month. Therefore, Lord Sabas is also an important figure in the St. Hilda family in Yulong City. Originally, Colin and Vera were planning to visit this person tomorrow, but unexpectedly, Queen Midla reminded them not to trust him. How is this going? In terms of seniority, Sabas is Midla's biological uncle. Is this a family fight? Colin was speechless for a while and quickly asked, Your Highness, why is this? Queen Midla remained silent. When Colin saw this, he couldn't continue to ask questions. At the end of the song, Colin let go of Queen Midla's slender hands and leaned down to salute. Queen Midla bowed her knee, returned the favor with a smile, and said softly, Believe me, the current Yulong City is a dangerous whirlpool. The best choice for you and Vera is to stay out of the matter and get involved rashly. It will only be difficult to escape. Colin narrowed his eyes and said solemnly, Her Royal Highness the Queen. But Queen Mitra interrupted directly, Don't ask too much, don't think too much, wait patiently for my news. After saying this, Queen Mitra swayed lightly and floated away. Colin was left in a daze. Colin, what's wrong with you? Vera came over, took her husband's arm, and asked doubtfully. I'll tell you when I get back. Colin patted Vera's little hand but saw a familiar figure walking towards him. I didn't expect to meet again so soon, Viscount Angelet. Count Evan walked over to Colin with a smile, then saluted and greeted Vera, and introduced the female companion beside him to the Collins. This is Miss Salia, the legitimate daughter of Prince Lehigh, and also my fiancée. Colin raised his eyebrows and turned to look at Count Evan's female companion. This Miss Salia is wearing a beige dress and has exquisite facial features, black hair and black eyes, and a gentle and charming temperament. She is the kind of woman who can especially inspire pity in men. But what really concerned Colin was the identity of the other party, the daughter of the paladin. Moreover, Colin remembered that the Marquis of the East he had just released, who was the brother of Earl Avon, was only married to the daughter of a certain earl in the East. It seems that the Duke of St. President really has the idea of changing his heir. Thinking of what he had said to Marquis Vincent on the Nushui River, Colin suddenly felt that the East Territory would definitely be very lively in the future. Just when Colin was thinking about it, Earl Evan sent an invitation to Vera. Beautiful Miss Vera, I wonder if I have the honor to dance with you. Vera turned to look at Colin and saw him smiling. He nodded and handed his hand to Earl Avon. Seeing the two walking to the dance floor hand in hand, Shalia blinked her big crystal eyes, seeming to say to Colin, What are you waiting for? Colin also realized what he should do and quickly extended an invitation to Salia. After receiving the other party's consent, Colin took the slender hand of the daughter of the paladin and walked into the center of the dance floor again. Did you and Earl Evan just get engaged? Colin put his arm around Salia's waist and asked curiously. Yes, just a week ago, Salia said softly, and then she stopped talking and concentrated on dancing. Generally speaking, in court dance, the man is the leader and the woman is the follower, but Colin discovered that this Shalia seemed to have a strange magical power that could, in turn, affect Colin's dance steps and even guide the palace. The grace and elegance of the dance are performed to the extreme, which is a pleasure to watch. Even someone like Colin, who was not proficient in court dance, seemed to have become a dance master at this moment. Colin couldn't help but be intoxicated by this feeling, and for a moment he forgot to continue to inquire whether Count Evan had other motives for coming to Dragon City at this time. Until the end of the song, Colin was still a little unfinished. Thunderous applause sounded immediately, and Colin came back to his senses. "You are the most outstanding dancer I have ever seen," Colin praised sincerely. "Thank you." Salia's pretty face turned red as if she hadn't recovered from the dance just now. "Wow. Viscount Angelet. I'm a little jealous of you." Salia didn't show such a tacit understanding when dancing with me. Count Evan brought Vera back to the sidelines and exclaimed exaggeratedly. Vera also praised Colin excitedly, and at the same time, she did not forget to ask Salia for the secret of dancing. Colin casually said a few words of modesty, and then asked Earl Evan, "Has your wedding date with Miss Salia been set? At the end of this year, I will distribute the invitations. I hope you and Miss Vera can come and visit us." "Okay. If there are no special circumstances, we will definitely go to Belu City to watch the ceremony," Colin responded with a smile. Next, Colin and Vera did not enter the dance floor again but chatted casually with Count and Count Evan on the sidelines. It wasn't until the night got darker that the guests left one after another. End of chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 295. Early the next morning, when Colin brought Vera to the restaurant, he finally saw Bachelor Don again. "Good morning, Miss Vera," Viscount Angelet. "Good morning, Bachelor Don. Yesterday, the Prime Minister invited you to have dinner at home." "Yes, the Prime Minister is very enthusiastic. I can't refuse." "Haha, it's okay, I can understand it. Moreover, the dinner at the Prime Minister's house will definitely not be much worse than that at the Phoenix Palace." "It's really not too much." Bachelor Don smiled slightly and then told Colin that he had a meeting with the Prime Minister last night, sitting on the lawn and eating sweet potatoes. Colin and Vera immediately looked at each other. They never expected that the dignified Prime Minister of the Empire would entertain guests like this. Of course, by thinking carefully about it, although this method is a bit rude, it also shows a sense of intimacy. It seems that the Prime Minister is treating Deo and the Bachelor, become his true self. The maid served a sumptuous breakfast. Colin was not too obsessed with the Prime Minister's weird hospitality. He cut off a piece of juicy fried steak and put it in his mouth, chewed it, and asked, "Then what did you talk to the Prime Minister about yesterday? How's it going?" Bachelor Don didn't answer immediately, but said to the maids around him, "You guys go down first." "Yes." When only Colin and the other three were left in the restaurant, Bachelor Don said, "Overall, the conversation was good, but there is good news and bad news. Let's talk about the good news first." Colin took a sip of milk and smiled. "A good day needs a good start." Master Don put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, signaled that he had finished eating, and then told the good news that Colin wanted to hear most. "The Prime Minister is willing to stand up at the right time and publicly declare his support. Master Joyce will inherit the title of Duke of the North." Colin nodded, very satisfied with the result. Vera was still a little confused and asked doubtfully, "The Prime Minister supports Joyce, how is this good news?" Bachelor Don smiled and recounted the conflict between Baron Heidegger and the Senate. Only then did Vera realize that the original purpose of asking the Prime Minister to support Joyce was to stimulate the Senate and get them to unanimously agree that she would inherit the position of Duke of the North. Colin continued to ask, "Then what is the bad news?" Bachelor Don's face became a little heavy and said, there is a Zhansong tribe that is rising strongly among the orcs. The western region has sent an expeditionary force to cross the Tianduan mountains and try to nip it in the bud in advance, but no good news has come back yet. The Prime Minister is worried that there will be problems in the western region, but at present, the senior officials of the imperial capital generally have no plans to send troops to support. Colin's face also changed. He changed from the predecessor's memory and dug up information about orcs, so he certainly understood the seriousness of this problem. If the western region is not exaggerating, then this is definitely the biggest threat that the glorious empire will face. After hearing this, Vera couldn't help but ask, why are the big shots in the imperial capital unwilling to send troops to support the western region? Colin twitched the corner of his mouth and smiled disdainfully. Before the disaster really came, most of the people will take chances and think things won't be that bad. Bachelor Dawn nodded and agreed. Indeed, the Central Empire is not willing to send troops easily before seeing a real threat, but other than that, in fact, there is another reason. Oh? What reason? This is another bad news, Bachelor Dawn said solemnly. Prince Lehigh requested to declare war on Yevil. What? Vera was shocked. Shout out. She had lived and studied in Seville for more than 10 years and had already regarded it as her second hometown. When she heard the news, she immediately couldn't help but become worried. Why is this happening? Is it because of the Eye of Judgment forbidden spell? But isn't the Empire worried that all the mages will be destroyed together? Bachelor Dawn sighed. It is indeed because of the Eye of Judgment. Prince Lehigh, he is not a person who can tolerate coercion. He would rather bear the risk of revenge from the mage to completely eliminate this extremely terrible threat to the knight class. Colin saw Vera's panicked expression and quickly held her cold little hand, comforting her. Not everyone has the determination and courage of Prince Leahy, right? This proposal to declare war on mages may not be implemented. Bachelor Dawn nodded. That's right, there are undercurrents in the imperial capital's political arena now, mainly because of this proposal. Moreover, His Majesty is obviously unwilling to declare war on the mage. He is deliberately staying behind closed doors because he does not want this proposal to pass the Imperial Council. Colin smiled clearly and said, I was at the dinner party yesterday. I heard that His Majesty is ill, so it's because of this. It's probably because of this. However, even if His Majesty keeps hiding and doesn't come forward, there is another way to implement this declaration of war proposal. Colin said in surprise, Senator Court. That's right. Would Prince Leahy do this? Colin said solemnly. This means completely breaking up with Emperor Reinhardt. At the time, Emperor Reinhardt secretly met with Jin Sur. When we reached a tacit agreement with him, we have completely offended Prince Leahy. So now Prince Leahy will probably no longer care about the dignity of the royal family. Colin's face gradually darkened. He also realized why this would be bad news for Vera. If Prince Lek wanted his proposal to be forced through the Senate without the Emperor's consent, he would have to obtain an absolute majority of votes in favor. This also means that he must convince more than 2/3 of the elders and provoke their hatred towards the mage. And Vera is also a mage. Originally, Bachelor Dawn's plan was to use the Prime Minister to influence the Senate's determination of the Duke of the North's succession, but now it seems that Prince Leahy's actions are likely to invalidate this plan. Perhaps Prince Lehigh didn't care who succeeded the Duke of the North, but he inadvertently blocked Vera's way. What's more, if the Empire really declares war on Yevil, the group of mages will most likely unleash a devastating revenge. Regardless of whether the final victims are the people of the Empire or the knights and nobles, the Radiant Empire's hatred of the mages will definitely reach its peak. At this time, as a mage, can Vera still stare at such hatred and successfully inherit the position of Duke of the North? Thinking of this, Colin immediately said in a deep voice, we can't let Prince Lehigh's proposal pass the Senate. Bachelor Dawn also nodded and agreed, that's right. But then, Colin felt a headache. Originally, their plan was to use the Prime Minister's statement to gain the support of the Senate through tricky methods, but now they found that if the trick didn't work, they still had to deal with those senators one by one. This requires extremely deep political capital and influence. And this is what Vera and Colin lack most now. What do you think? Colin asked. He could only place his hope on Maester Don now. After being pondered for a moment, Bachelor Daon slowly said, there are 117 members of the Imperial Senate, all of whom are prestigious figures from the major families in the Empire in terms of numbers. They are roughly from the East, South, and South families from the 4 Western and Northern regions and the Scarlet Flame territory each account for 1/5. Therefore, the power of the entire Senate is basically the same as that of the vassals in the Empire. There are also 5 consuls in the Senate, each from the 5 great saints. Knight families can have a great influence on the senators of their respective vassal families. If we want Prince Lehi's proposal to go bankrupt, we must win the support of at least 2 consuls and use them to influence the senators of their factions. In this way, the proposal to declare war on mages failed to obtain an absolute majority of votes. I think the 2 consuls we are most likely to win over are Sabas, the consul of the St. Hilda family in the Senate, and the consul of the San Lorenzo family in the Senate, Latam. Colin's brows were still frowning. He knew that what Bachelor Dawn said was very reasonable, but he knew that these 2 people were not easily dismissed. Talk. Sebastian was born in the St. Hilda family and was Vera's uncle by seniority. He could certainly represent the interests of the St. Hilda family, but the interests of the St. Hilda family were not necessarily Vera's interests. After all, she was still not the Duke of the North. Moreover, at last night's ball, Queen Midla specifically reminded herself not to trust Archon Sabas easily. Although Colin did not completely trust Queen Midla, such a reminder still left a trace of haze in his heart. As for Consul Latham of the San Lorenzo family, I'm afraid he is more easily persuaded by Prince Lehi. Unless Emperor Reinhard personally comes forward, it is possible to change the position of the elders of San Lorenzo. It's just that this unreliable emperor can't make Colin feel at ease. Then let's go visit Archon Sabas this afternoon, Vera said. Colin hesitated but still did not express his doubts. First of all, it is impossible for him to believe whatever Queen Midla says. He prefers to test it himself. Moreover, Vera comes to Yulong City as a junior, so she should pay a visit to Archon Sabas out of emotion and reason, otherwise, she will how rude. Okay, I'll arrange for someone to send a greeting card first. End of chapter. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 296. Archon Sabas's residence is located in the northern district of Yulong City, covering an area of more than 300 acres. In the aristocratic area of the imperial capital where land is at a premium, it can be considered a top-notch mansion. This mansion is built facing the street, with a total of 3 floors and a height of 15 meters. It is made of solid granite as the main body and precious white glazed rock as the exterior wall. From a distance, it looks like a jade castle. But such a gorgeous building is just the facade of the consul's residence. There are beautiful courtyards and rows of buildings behind it. That is the main building area, and only distinguished guests are eligible to be invited in. When Colin helped Vera step out of the carriage, there were already a dozen attendants waiting at the door. Miss Vera, Viscount Angelette, welcome home, a well-dressed old butler bowed and saluted, and the other attendants also followed suit and bowed to Vera. Colin looked at the old butler's face, but he always felt that it looked familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Moreover, he found that although the other person's attitude was very good, the smile on his face was a bit professional and lacked sincerity. Long time no see, housekeeper Demoke. Vera smiled and nodded at the old housekeeper, and Colin put away his doubts and nodded in greeting. You two, please come in quickly, the master is waiting for you in the living room. Housekeeper Demoke immediately led Vera and Colin to the inner courtyard. When the other party turned around, Vera leaned into Colin's ear and explained in a low voice, Demoke is Drendan's brother. Colin suddenly understood. Drindon was the former butler of the St. Hilda family, and his head was beheaded by Colin himself. Now he finally understood why the Demic butler looked familiar, and it was no wonder that the other person's smile was perfunctory. Haha, Colin suddenly felt that this visit might not go well. After entering the door, there is a large green space. Colin didn't know what kind of grass was grown here, but it was soft and comfortable to step on, like a natural carpet, and it exuded a fresh breath, which was refreshing. Just as Colin and others approached the main castle, the crisp sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded from behind, and then a slightly frivolous voice came over. "Cousin Vera, welcome to Yulong City." Colin looking back, I saw about 10 people approaching them on horseback. The leader was about 20 years old, with a thin face, narrow eyes, and a slightly frivolous smile on his lips. It was exactly what he said just now. "Cousin Weber, long time no see." Vera turned around and greeted him with a smile. Then he whispered to Colin that this knight Weber was the eldest grandson of Archon Sabas. Weber came to Vera but did not dismount. He just leaned slightly on the horse to salute, then glanced at Colin and said, "This is my cousin-in-law, Viscount Angelet, right?" The other party's attitude made Colin agitated. Accurate. As a descendant of the St. Hilda family, he didn't dismount his horse and salute when he met a noble daughter of his direct line. Not to mention, Vera is about to inherit the position of Duke of the North, and Weber's attitude is too dismissive. "Hello, Knight Weber." Colin smiled lightly and nodded casually to the other party. He has a serious imperial title. Even if Weber's grandfather is the consul of the Senate, he is not qualified to salute him. "Viscount Angelet, I have heard of your name even in Yulong City." Weber looked at Colin condescendingly and said in a sinister tone, "Silver Moon City annihilated the main force of the Pegasus Legion, and the Sky Ice Field killed the Troll Emperor, defeating the Dwarf Coalition outside Winter City, is really admirable." Colin said lightly and modestly, "You are too kind. This is the achievement of the soldiers in the northern border who fought bravely and cannot be entirely attributed to me alone. You are so humble, even my grandfather praised you as the well-deserved guardian of the North. You also asked me to learn more from you." Weber changed the subject and said, "But I really want to know whether you are qualified to become my teacher." Colin wanted to say that he had no interest in becoming your teacher at all. Just when he was about to dismiss this guy who was extremely hostile to him, he saw that Weber had already dismounted and invited. "Come on, Viscount Angelet, let me see your true strength." "Weber, don't be ridiculous." Vera's face sank, and her favorability towards this cousin was instantly cleared. Anger flashed on Weber's face. Vera's reprimand in an elder's tone made him feel uncomfortable, but he did not dare target Vera, so he could only continue to provoke Colin. "Viscount Angelet, aren't you scared? How about this, we don't need weapons, just compete with fists and kicks." Okay, Colin was furious and determined to teach this boy, who didn't know the heights of the world, a lesson. As for whether he would offend Archon Sabas because of this, he no longer wanted to worry about it. Moreover, he now felt more and more that it would be impossible for Vera to win over Sabas. Seeing Colin accept the challenge, Weber immediately smiled, stretched his body, and assumed a fighting posture, as if he were afraid that Colin would regret it. Weber, who became a 4th-level knight before the age of 30, was ranked among the top geniuses even in Dragon City, where there were many masters. Weber has rarely lost battles with knights of the same generation, which is why he confidently challenged Colin. "Viscount Angelet, be careful." In an instant, Knight Weber roared, his whole body was filled with holy light, and he stepped hard on the ground with his toes. The terrifying power surged through his body like an explosion, like waves rushing towards his right fist. All his strength, all his beliefs, and all his fanaticism seemed to be gathered into this punch. Full of unspeakable malice such as jealousy, resentment, and hostility, Weber's punch unexpectedly gained some kind of sublimation. He even felt that this was an extraordinary punch. With this punch, Webb seemed to have seen Colin screaming and falling to the ground. Guardian of the North? The Troll Emperor's gravedigger? A dazzling star rising in the north? Why don't you cry and beg for mercy at my hands? Ha ha ha, I am the most outstanding rider among the young generation in the north. Suddenly, Weber felt a sharp pain coming from his body. His feverish attention was quickly brought back to reality, and the beautiful pictures in his imagination were shattered into pieces like a mirror. What's going on? Weber opened his eyes wide and stared blankly in front of him. His fist was only a few inches away from Colin's head, but even such a small distance seemed like a chasm like the ends of the earth, which could never be crossed. At the same time, Weber was experiencing severe pain in his chest. He slowly lowered his head and saw Colin's right index finger gently tapping his chest. Bang! A huge explosive force exploded from Weber's chest in an instant, taking him flying far back. Weber felt as if his body had been hit head-on by a violent rhinoceros. His limbs were weak, and his head was dizzy. He wanted to struggle to stand up, but he tried several times without success. Master Weber. A middle-aged knight immediately got off his horse and tried to help Weber up. Don't touch me! Weber roared, the expression on his face was particularly ferocious. One move. He didn't even catch the opponent's move. Anger and shame flooded into Weber's brain, driving him almost crazy. Norman, come on, Weber ordered the middle-aged knight who was trying to help him up. The Norman knight hesitated for a moment and then advised, Master, this is not the proper way to treat guests. I'll let you go. Weber seemed to have fallen into madness. Don't you always admire Viscount Angelet? How can we not seize such a good opportunity to hand over now? Go quickly. The Norman knight had no choice but to turn around and stand in front of Colin. He performed a knight's salute first and then said, I'm sorry, Viscount Angelet, please allow me to see your martial arts skills. Colin smiled faintly and returned the salute. Please. Just as the momentum of the two people continued to rise and they were preparing to decide the outcome, an old and deep voice suddenly came. Stop it. End of chapter. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 297. Colin calmed down his breath and turned around to see a tall, thin old man standing behind him. He was wearing simple black casual clothes with white hair, but he was energetic and had a strong and straight body. He looked like a soldier at first glance. He must have been on the battlefield when he was young. Grandpa, Weber quickly struggled to get up and greet her. Only then did Colin know that this old man was the target of their visit. Archon Sabas. Humph. Is this how you greet distinguished guests? Sebastian glared and scolded Weber. The sudden change of mood made the temperature of the scene seem to drop several degrees. Grandpa, I was wrong. Weber, who was originally arrogant and domineering, turned completely into a quail in front of Sabas. When Vera saw this, she smiled and came to the rescue. Uncle, you don't have to blame my cousin too much, he was just playing around with Colin. Sabas looked at Vera, and a smile appeared on his face. She nodded and said, Vera, I haven't seen you for many years, you have grown so big. I heard that you are already married. Yes, Uncle. Vera came to Colin, took his arm, and said sweetly. He smiled and said, this Viscount Colin Angelet is my husband. Hello, Your Majesty the Consul. Colin quickly bowed and saluted. I've heard some things about you. It's very good. You are indeed a young hero. Sebastian nodded to Colin and praised him. Colin said a few words modestly. However, Colin was not relieved by the other party's gentle and friendly attitude. Every old fox in politics will have this kind of superficial skill, but only when the other party's vital interests and political stance are involved, will their true side be revealed. After some pleasantries, the atmosphere suddenly relaxed a lot, and Sabas enthusiastically led Vera and Colin into the main castle's living room. The decor of this living room is a perfect example of luxury. The curved dome made of century-old paulownia wood from the dark forest is covered with gold foil and inlaid with various gemstones. The hanging crystal candlestick chandelier emits soft light, reflecting on the exquisite and unique murals and sculptures, making it look magnificent and full of elegance. Noble artistic atmosphere. Saba sat down on the main seat, and then several young and beautiful maids took small steps and presented various fruits, desserts, and purple gold wine bottles. They filled each guest's wine glass with transparent wine. A fresh, elegant, yet mellow and sweet aroma of strange wine spread in the living room. Even Colin, who didn't know much about wine, could tell that this was definitely a valuable wine, even better than the one at the palace banquet last night. Sebastian raised his glass in greeting and said with a hearty smile, "This is the gin I have collected for 80 years, come and try it." Colin and Vera quickly raised their glasses in return. While sipping the wine, Colin looked around. He had to admit that Archon Sabas was rich beyond his imagination. You must know that although Sebastian has a noble status, he does not have a title or fief, and there is no fixed tax income. If he only relies on the salary of the Senate consul, Colin cannot imagine how he can build such a building. It can be called a luxurious manor. I have always heard that the elders of the Senate have a big appetite. Now it seems that Colin feels that he has underestimated the grey income of these elders. He was suddenly glad that when he wanted to change the family crest, he was dissuaded by butler Aemon. Otherwise, if the Senate was really alarmed, the Angelet family would probably bleed a lot. Sabas put down the wine glass and asked, "Vera, I heard that your father left a will." "Yes," Uncle Vera immediately took out the will and gave it to Sabas. Sabas opened it and looked at it. There was no emotion or anger on his face. Then he returned the will to Vera and said in a deep voice, "Since your father has made you the Marquis of the North, you will inherit the position of Duke of the North. I have no objection. However, at this time, if you want to successfully accept His Majesty's canonization, you still need to do one thing." "What?" "Be baptized." Colin's heart moved and he quickly asked, "Your Excellency, Consul, there is no provision in the Lord's law that one must be a knight to accept the imperial title, right?" "Indeed, there is no such thing." Sabas nodded, but then frowned and said, "But the current situation in the imperial capital is quite special. Vera's identity as a mage will cause her to suffer a lot of criticism and may even prevent her from successfully inheriting the position of Duke of the North." Vera asked in a solemn tone, "Is it because Prince Lehi is preparing to launch a war against Yevil?" Base nodded. "That's right." Colin considered his tone and said tentatively, "This matter is still in the proposal stage and may not be implemented." Sebastian smiled calmly and said confidently, "Believe me, the Empire will soon declare war on Yevil." Colin's heart sank. A Senate consul said this, which shows that Prince Lehi has successfully won the support of the vast majority of senators, and is very confident that this proposal can skip Emperor Reinhardt and pass directly through the Senate. The situation is not good. "Uncle, do you also support the declaration of war on Jewel?" Vera couldn't help but ask. Sabas looked into Vera's eyes and sighed, "Vera, I know you have feelings for Yevil, but I still advise you to change your stance as soon as possible and convert to the Lord of Glory, and don't let yourself go against the imperial nobles." Vera shook her head and said, "Uncle, in fact, I have already converted to the Lord of Glory, but I have always believed that mages and knights are not naturally opposed on the road to pursuing arcane truth. I can also feel the guidance of the Lord of Glory." Sabas' face straightened up, and he said in a serious voice, "Vera, if you are willing to serve the Lord of Glory wholeheartedly, you must give up the path of arcane magic, otherwise, it will be blasphemy to the Lord of Glory." Seeing Vera return, wanting to argue again, Colin quickly held her hand and shook his head slightly. Vera understood, suppressed the dissatisfaction and grievance in her heart, and said no more. Colin smiled, relaxed the slightly solemn atmosphere in the hall, and said, Your Majesty the Consul, after all, Vera is a little unfamiliar with how to serve the Lord of Glory, but please believe that she has a heart of refuge in the Lord of Glory. It's sincere, and we will contact the church as soon as possible to arrange the baptism ceremony. Well, that's naturally the best. Sebastian's face softened slightly. After Vera is baptized, I can also bring up the matter of the Duke of the North's succession to the Senate. The discussion agenda of the Senate meeting, however, if you want this matter to pass smoothly, you will also need to prepare some lobbying funds. Lobbying funds? Isn't it just a bribe? Colin was speechless when he saw that the other party accepted the bribe so openly, and the target was his grandniece. At the same time, I also gained a deeper understanding of the Senate. Your Majesty the Consul, how much lobbying funds are needed? Colin asked carefully. Sebastian picked up the wine glass, took a sip, and said calmly, 5 million gold coins. Seeing Colin and Vera's eyes widen, he immediately added, don't make a fuss, this is something I will personally help you lobby for. If you change the cost, it will only cost more. Colin sighed and looked embarrassed. Your Majesty the Consul, it's not that we don't believe you, but the North has just experienced a big chaos. The St. Hilda family is really unable to raise such a huge sum of money in a short period of time. Sebastian glanced at Colin and said calmly, Viscount Angelet, didn't you defeat the Troll Empire and force them to sign the peace agreement? Did you get a large amount of war reparations and slaves? Colin's anger rose in his heart. This old guy actually plotted against him. It is indeed true, but you may not know that the finances of the Troll Empire are also very difficult. The war compensation is paid in installments. As for the slaves, I am afraid that they will not be able to collect them in a while. Sebastian held the wine glass. He placed it heavily on the table and said in a cold voice, Viscount Angelet, if you are unwilling to show due sincerity, I'm afraid it will be difficult to move forward in Yulong City. Colin pretended to be sincere and fearful and responded, Your Excellency, Consul, you misunderstood. I just want to confirm with Ice Rock City first the status of the Troll Empire's compensation, and I will not reply to you until I have the exact information. The smile on Sebastian's face returned, and he nodded. Said, that's right, you two are still too young and don't understand the political rules of the imperial capital. It's inevitable that you will make some mistakes and offend people who shouldn't be offended. So, from now on, you should consult me first if you have any questions, opinions. As an elder, of course I will give you the help you deserve. Colin and Vera stood up quickly to thank you. After chatting for a while, the two of them said goodbye and left. After leaving the gate of the manor and boarding the carriage, Vera's expression changed from sunny to gloomy, and she asked, Colin, do we really want to trust Sebastian? Colin heard the change in Vera's name for Sebastian. Smiling secretly in her heart, she said, you should already have the answer yourself. Vera nodded, frowned slightly, and said, I don't like this person. Then don't worry about him, Colin said lightly. Vera was still hesitant. Then, will this anger the Senate? Sabas alone cannot represent the Senate, Colin said coldly. What's more, he may have forgotten that, the St. Hilda family pushed him to the position of consul. It is he who needs the St. Hilda family. The St. Hilda family does not need him. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 298. What, Archon Latham rejected our request to visit. As soon as he returned to his residence in the Phoenix Palace, Bachelor Dawn brought another piece of bad news. Yes, Lord Viscount, they responded that Consul Latham has been in poor health recently and cannot meet with foreign guests. Vera sighed and said, it seems that the consul of the San Lorenzo family also prefers Latham. It belongs to the prince. Bachelor Dawn shook his head and said, Not necessarily. This Archon Latam is 108 years old. It is said that he often has health problems. This time he may not be looking for excuses to prevaricate us. Kaylin was speechless for a while and asked, "You are so old, and you are not retiring?" Bachelor Daon explained helplessly, "The consulship is for life as long as Latam is still alive. He will not retire voluntarily. After all, the members of the Senate are all collaterals of each family, without titles or territories. Once they are stripped of the aura of the Senate, they will immediately become minor characters that no one cares about." "Is there no way to remove a consul?" "Is that so?" Colin asked thoughtfully, his eyes flashing. Bachelor Dawn seemed to have guessed the real purpose of Colin's question and shook his head. "No, the original purpose of establishing the Senate was to create a completely independent system of supervision and checks and balances outside of the existing administrative system of the Empire. So, in order to ensure that the decisions of the Senate members will not be affected by external factors, once a senator is elected, he will serve for life. Unless the consul violates the laws of the Empire, not even His Majesty the Emperor can remove him." Colin Yuxiao is a little disdainful of this so-called independent supervision system. Today, it is a well-known fact that the Senate collects bribes, and he himself was only asked for sky-high lobbying funds by Archon Sabas. This shows that the Senate system has been completely corrupted. "Are there no means to restrict the elders?" Bachelor Dawn thought for a while and said, "As for the means of restriction, there really are none. However, there are two main ways to influence the elders. The first is bribery. This is also the most commonly used lobbying method. Senators have no territory. If you want to live a luxurious life, you must have the support of a gray income. Another method is the inheritance of the senator's seat." "Inheritance?" Colin asked doubtfully. "Senior, isn't it a lifelong tenure? How do I inherit?" "The inheritance I'm talking about is different from the inheritance of ordinary titles. The basis of title inheritance is hereditary. As long as the law of lords remains unchanged, the first heir of the lord will naturally inherit everything about him. But senators are different. Since senators are not hereditary, the descendants of senators cannot naturally inherit their seats in the Senate." After hearing this, Colin already understood what Bachelor Daon meant. The so-called inability to inherit naturally means that the descendants of senators can be artificially pushed into the Senate. The current members of the Senate are all from the 117 most prestigious lord families in the glorious empire. To become a senator, you must first become a senatorial candidate recommended by each family, and then this candidate needs to obtain half of the Senate. Only with the above approval vote can the person formally enter the Senate. The second restriction method that Bachelor Dawn mentioned refers to the recommendation qualifications of the senior candidate. Each family also uses this method to ensure that their elders will not deviate from the will of the family. For example, Sebastian's consultation is lifelong. If he wants his grandson Weber to enter the Senate and inherit his position after his death, he must first ask the Duke of St. Hilda to recommend Weber as a senatorial candidate. In this way, Duke St. Hilda also had the means to restrict Sabas. But the problem now is that Vera has not succeeded in the position of Duke. On the contrary, she still needs the approval of the Senate. Generally, the succession of imperial noble titles does not need to go through the Senate. It only needs to be canonized by the Lord. The only difference is that for the dukes of the four realms, they guard the four sides of the empire and are the key force in resisting foreigners. The selection of the duke is crucial, so the Senate is added as a procedure. But Sebastian's attitude just now made Colin realize that this consul, who was born into the St. Hilda family, did not really want to help Wei become the Duke of the North. But Colin found that he had no means to influence the other party except for paying huge lobbying funds. Do you really want to be ripped off? No. If the other party refuses to do anything after receiving the money, Colin really has nothing to do with him. Moreover, now that the northern border has just been pacified, the money is urgently needed to alleviate the predicament, but it cannot be used to take advantage of the old guy. Otherwise, kill. Colin felt furious. But then there was some hesitation. After all, in a place like the imperial capital, where dragons and tigers are hidden, Colin didn't want to use this method of tearing one's face unless it was absolutely necessary. If he were discovered, he would have no choice but to take Vera into exile. Or else, transform. But Colin also felt that transforming into a vampire would be very risky. Because vampires are self-aware, Colin never tries to transform his enemies into vampires. Colin is kind to the three current blood descendants, Knight Shire, Queen Elsa, and Knight Vala. Seal was reborn from a broken limb, and Elsa was resurrected from the dead and took revenge. As for Vala, she felt guilty towards Colin and died to atone for her sins before being given a second life by Colin. In short, even if these three people are not blood descendants, they will not betray Colin. Transforming into a vampire only strengthened this attachment and made Colin trust them even more. But with Sebastian's words, Colin didn't dare transform the other person into a blood descendant. Though he can indeed suppress the bloodline to make the vampire unable to resist him, this control is limited to the physical body and cannot control the spirit. What if Sebastian pretends to give in to Colin, then turns around and sells Colin? Of course, if you transform into a blood slave without self-awareness, there is no need to worry about betrayal. But in this case, it is easy to see the flaws. After all, blood slaves have no self-awareness and only know how to obey orders. Unless Colin separates his consciousness to control it, this kind of control is very rigid, and it is okay to fool him in a hurry, but over time, his flaws will inevitably be exposed. Is there really nothing we can do about Sabas? Colin thought for a long time, but suddenly an idea flashed, and he said, "Actually, we don't have to win over Archon Sabas." "What do you mean?" Vera asked, a confused look on his face. "The consul only has one vote. Whether he agrees or not actually doesn't have much impact as long as we can win the approval of the other 20 or so northern elders." Bachelor Dawn's eyes lit up. "You mean to evade Archon Sabas?" Colin smiled and nodded. "That's right, although Vera is not the Duke of the North yet, the North is now under our control as long as we pay attention to the major families in the North. By exerting pressure, we can influence the elders of each family through the patriarchs of these families. In this way, Sabas will be insignificant." Bachelor Dawn nodded repeatedly. "This is indeed a good idea, but I am worried that the time may be too late." Colin immediately ordered vigorously and resolutely, "No matter, we don't know when Prince Leahy and the others are going to send the proposal to declare war to the Senate, but we can't just sit back and wait for death. Vera, you wrote to Ling Dong immediately. City, please ask Marquis Garcia to summon the Northern Lords and put pressure on them." "Okay," Vera agreed immediately, turned around, and went to find the paper and a pen. Colin said to Bachelor Dawn, "Okay, let's just assume that we have won more than 20 votes in the North next. We still need to persuade the elders of the First Realm to ensure that Prince Leahy's proposal to declare war will not be absolutely approved. The majority vote in favor." Bachelor Dawn pondered for a moment and suggested, "Sir Viscount, I think the greatest certainty is with the San Lorenzo family. Since Consul Latham does not want to see us, we can try with someone else." "Who?" "Her Royal Highness the Queen." "Queen?" Colin hesitated. He was no less wary of the beautiful Queen than Sabas. If possible, he did not want to ask this person. "I'm afraid the Queen will have difficulty influencing the elders of the San Lorenzo family." Bachelor Daoan shook his head and explained, "Sir Viscount, I hope that you can meet His Majesty the Emperor through the Queen. He is the one who can really influence the family of San Lorenzo. He is a key figure in the attitude of the senator." "But, isn't the Emperor ill?" Vera on the side intervened after hearing the words. Bachelor Dawn curled his lips and said, "It's probably because he's pretending to be ill. He's hiding from Prince Leahy. At the same time, he doesn't want the proposal to declare war to pass the Imperial Council." Colin also nodded and said, "That's right. Moreover, The Emperor is actually responsible for this matter. He is the most anxious person. If the declaration of war proposal is passed by the Senate with a large vote, it will definitely be a fatal blow to his prestige. It should even be said that from now on, Prince Lehigh and the Senate can directly ignore him. Yes, Bachelor Dawn said. Furthermore, Emperor Reinhard holds the right to recommend the senatorial candidates of the San Lorenzo family and can influence the attitude of Archon Latam more than we can. Just as Caitlin was determined to see Queen Midla again, an attendant knocked on the door and delivered an invitation letter to Colin. Colin opened it with some confusion. Crete, Saint Gerion. Upon hearing this name, Bachelor Dawn's eyes lit up and he said, "This is the ruling family of the Western Territory, Lord Saint Gerion in the Senate, officer." Colin also smiled immediately and said, "This Lord Consul invited us to a banquet." End of chapter. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 299. The afterglow of the setting sun enveloped Yulong City, covering the entire city with a gorgeous veil. On the streets of the North District, a gorgeously decorated carriage was slowly moving forward. After seeing the badge on the side wall of the carriage, passers-by stopped to salute. As a paladin family that has protected the northern border of the empire for thousands of years, it is no surprise that Saint Hilda has such prestige. In the carriage, Colin looked at Vera, who kept nodding to passers-by, and said with a smile, "Aren't you tired?" Vera then lowered the curtain of the carriage, blocking out the eyes of reverence and admiration, and stuck out her tongue. He said, "I'm a little tired." After saying that, he twisted his sore neck. This time she went to the Cretan consul's home for a banquet. Vera wore a dignified and elegant palace dress. Her exquisite tailoring skills vividly outlined her perfect body curves. Her long golden hair was pulled into a lady's bun, which made the swan's elegant and long white neck reveal itself. Colin just reached out his hand and rubbed his wife's neck. Vera turned her head and gave her husband a sweet smile. There was also a light bulb in the carriage. Maester Dawn, who kept looking down at the patterns on the carpet as if he wanted to study some mystery from them. Colin also saw the other party's embarrassment, so he broke the silence. "Dawn, why do you think the Cretan consul took the initiative to invite us this time?" "It should be that he wants to cooperate with us." Bachelor Dawn did not look up. Responded in a deep voice, "No good news has come back from the Western Expeditionary Force that went deep into the Orc territory. The St. Grian family definitely doesn't want to see the Empire declare war on the mages at this time. After all, they still count on the Central Empire to provide military assistance to the Western Territory." "Yeah." Colin nodded. He also judged this way, so he felt more relaxed and happy along the way. With the support of a group of elders in the Western region, it would be more certain to reject Prince Leahy's proposal. While he was talking, the carriage had stopped. Bachelor Dawn got out of the carriage first, and then Colin followed suit with Vera in hand. "Miss Vera, Viscount Angelette, welcome to Nightingale Manor." The speaker was an old man with a clear face. He was wearing a white aristocratic dress of high quality and fine workmanship, with simple but tasteful decoration. His face is covered with traces of the passage of time, and his hair is somewhat gray, but there are far more black hairs than white hairs. His eyes are bright, his face is rosy, and his waist is straight. Although he is old, he looks quite strong. The old man has a gentle voice and an elegant temperament, and his movements show the majesty of a superior. This person is one of the 5 consuls of the Senate, Crete Saint Gerion. Colin and Vera hurriedly stepped forward to salute and greet them, feeling excited. You know, when they went to see Sabas this morning, one of their own, the other party didn't go out to greet him. Now, when they came to see the governor of the Western region, they received such courtesy. In comparison, it can be seen that Sabas base has no sincerity in helping Vera at all. Under the leadership of the Cretan Archon, everyone entered the manor. Of course, no one with short eyes jumped out to challenge Colin along the way. Hundreds of candles illuminated the restaurant as if it were daytime, and the air was filled with the fresh and elegant fragrance of grass and trees. Crete warmly invited Vera and her group to take a seat, and then the young and beautiful maids filed in and presented them with exquisite food. The decoration of Nightingale Manor is also extremely luxurious. It seems that the Cretan consul is not alone in the Senate. However, Colin didn't care whether the other party was greedy for money. As long as he could get the help he deserved, he didn't mind paying a price. Of course, it would be impossible to speak loudly like Sebastian, and Colin did not want to be taken advantage of. The Cretan consul raised his wine glass and said in a hearty voice, "Dear guests from the north, although the current situation in the empire is turbulent, I believe that the positions of the west and the north on certain issues are consistent. As long as we join forces, cooperate, advance, and retreat together, you will definitely achieve the desired results." Colin's eyes lit up, and he was surprised by the frankness and sincerity of the Western governor. He drank the wine in one gulp and then echoed with a smile. "Your Majesty the Consul, you are right. We in the north also believe that this is not the best time to declare war on Yevil." "Very good." Crete nodded with satisfaction, but then asked with some worry, "But Consul Sabas of your family supports the declaration of war against Jewel and is instigating a group of elders in the north to vote in favor of Prince Lehi's proposal. Miss Vera, do you know about this?" Vera, his face changed slightly, and he nodded, "Yes, Mr. Consul, we know about this. However, please rest assured that Sabas alone cannot represent the north, and he may not be able to influence the attitude of all the northern elders." Colin also smiled and added, "Although Vera has not officially inherited the position of Duke of the North, she has the will of the previous Duke and is the legitimate first heir. Moreover, the major lords of the North also recognize Vera's inheritance rights. They will put pressure on their own elders to veto the declaration of war proposal." The Cretan consul's face relaxed and smiled again, saying, "Okay, as long as the northern and western territories are consistent, then the declaration of war proposal will not matter. I want to get an absolute majority of votes in favor." Seeing this, Bachelor Dawn reminded him with a careful tone, "Your Majesty the Consul, the only thing that can be considered now is the issue of time. Miss Vera has already written a letter back to the north, requesting Marquis Garcia. The northern lords exert pressure, but it may take some time for this pressure to be transmitted to the elders of the northern territory. I just don't know if I can catch up with the vote on this proposal in time." The Cretan consul heard this. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, it will definitely be in time." Seeing how confident the other party was, Colin quickly asked, "Oh, I wonder if the Senate has arranged a voting agenda for this proposal." Crete shook his head and said, "Not yet, but don't worry, until the end of this month, Prince Lehi's proposal cannot be submitted to the Senate for a vote." "Why? Do you know why this proposal has been delayed for so long without entering the Senate? Because in order to submit the proposal to the Senate for a vote, a rotating chairman is required, and the rotating chairman this month is Consul Latham." Colin's heart moved, and he immediately understood what the other party meant. Recalling that Archon Latham pretended to be sick to refuse Vera's visit, he suddenly realized. "You are saying, Archon Latham deliberately pretended to be ill to delay and prevent the proposal from entering the Senate?" Critter smiled. Nodding, he admitted Colin's guess. Vera's face lit up and she said, "So, the elders of the San Lorenzo family are also opposed to the proposal?" Crete shook his head and said, "No, Prince Lehi's influence is too big. The elders of the San Lorenzo family are wavering, and it is estimated that most of them will vote in favor." "That's enough," Colin said excitedly. "After all, we only need to get 1/3 of the negative votes stop the passage of this proposal." At this time, the stone in his heart finally fell to the ground. However, through this incident, Colin also deeply realized the terrifying influence of Prince Lehi in the imperial capital. Even though Emperor Reinhard and the governors of the San Lorenzo family were unwilling to declare war on Jewel, they did not dare to directly oppose his proposal. They could only delay it by pretending to be ill and then using other means. Let the proposal die. Haha, no wonder Emperor Reinhard would rather take risks and cooperate with Mr. Jin in order to obtain the means to restrain the paladins. No matter who sits on the throne, facing such a powerful paladin will probably have trouble sleeping and eating. Afterward, everyone put aside their worries and began to enjoy the delicious food. As they talked and laughed, the atmosphere of the banquet gradually became lively. But at this moment, an old man who looked like a butler hurriedly came to the Cretan Archon and reported a few words in a low voice. Then everyone saw that Crete's face became visibly pale. A bad premonition arose in Colin's heart, and he asked cautiously, "Your Majesty the Consul, what happened?" Crete was stunned for a moment, seeming to be a little slow to react. After a while, he raised his head and looked at Colin, speaking in an extremely serious tone. He said solemnly, "Consul Latham has unfortunately passed away just now." End of this chapter. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 300. Of events in the brightly lit restaurant, the only sound left was the sound of breathing. This sudden bad news caught everyone off guard. Their original dreams disappeared like bubbles, and the cold and cruel reality made everyone feel heavy. After a long while, Colin asked in a difficult tone, "How did Archon Latham die?" "Died?" Archon Crete squeezed out 4 words through his teeth, his face full of expressions that could not be concealed. Of fear and anger. Obviously, no one present believed this answer. How could Archon Latham die at such a critical moment? It seems that Prince Leahy's side has lost patience and actually took the most extreme measures to remove the biggest obstacle in front of the proposal to declare war. After Archon Latham, who will be the rotating chairman, Bachelor Dawn asked in a deep voice. "Emerson Saint President," Crete said solemnly. Colin's heart also sank to the bottom. The surname is St. Prose. This consul obviously comes from the east and the direction of the east. Colin also met Earl Evan, the second son of the Duke of the East, and his fiancée at the palace banquet yesterday. This fiancée is the daughter of Prince Leahy. So even thinking about it with one's buttocks, the Eastern Territory must have completely turned to Prince Leahy. And from the perspective of its own interests, the Eastern Territory is also the force that most hope to see the Empire declare war on Yevili. After all, Yevili itself is located at the junction of the Eastern Territory and Huia Forest. Its existence has always been rooted in the heart of the Eastern Territory. A thorn. Now that the Empire is willing to send troops to wipe out Jewel, the Eastern Territory will definitely support it with both hands and feet. After the death of Consul Latham, Consul Imogen took over as the rotating chairman of the Senate. Of course, he would not continue to delay and would definitely push for a vote on the proposal to declare war on Yevil as soon as possible. Under such circumstances, Vera had no time to put pressure on the northern elders to vote against the proposal, despite the orders of Archon Sabas. Moreover, the death of Consul Latham will also shock the elders of the San Lorenzo family, and I am afraid that more people will turn to Prince Leahy as a result. Therefore, if the proposal to declare war is put to a vote in the Senate at this time, if nothing else happens, it will definitely receive an absolute majority of votes in favor. Thinking of this, Colin inevitably felt despair in his heart. Bang! The Cretan Archon slapped his hand heavily on the dining table. He could no longer suppress the anger and fear in his heart and growled, "He is breaking the rules of the game." Indeed. It was too much to brazenly kill a Senate consul. As both a consul and a consul, Crete inevitably feels a sense of sadness at the death of a rabbit or a fox. He suddenly stood up and said angrily, "I will never condone this kind of desecration of the Empire's highest authority, no matter who did it, they must pay the price for it." The Cretan consul's face was ashen. His whole body could not help but tremble slightly, and he didn't know whether it was because of anger or fear. But obviously, he didn't want to let it go. Even though the perpetrator may be Prince Leahy, the consul from the western region, he is not willing to compromise. I saw him looking at Vera and Colin with bright eyes and said solemnly, I will immediately contact the familiar elders and ask for a thorough investigation into the cause of Archon Latam's death. After that, without waiting for a response, that's it. He strode out of the restaurant in a hurry. Colin and Vera looked at each other for a while, then they could only sigh a few times, say goodbye to the housekeeper, and leave with heavy hearts. After boarding the carriage, the three of them fell silent, obviously thinking about how to solve the situation. The situation was already good, and Prince Lehi's proposal could be prevented from passing the Senate, but no one expected that the paladin of the San Lorenzo family would directly choose to overturn the table. This is so unruly. Colin was secretly angry. He had always restrained himself and worked hard within the framework of this political game. But now, since someone is the first to destroy the game, don't blame him for not following the rules. At this moment, Vera suddenly asked, Colin, do you think the Cretan Archon can find out the real murderer of Archon Latam? Colin sighed and said, I don't think there is much hope since Prince Lehi dared to kill someone, he would certainly not leave any traces therefore, even if everyone knew that he killed Latam if no evidence could be produced, no one could do anything to him. That's right, no one can do anything to Prince Lehi. Bachelor Don also agreed, but then he added solemnly, but people's hearts change without evidence. Prince Lehi's move seems to have succeeded in making himself his proposal has a chance to pass the Senate, but he will lose more. It may not be obvious in a short time, but this wanton violation of the rules will one day bring him a fatal backlash. Colin nodded silently. That's right, Prince Lehi now relies on peerless force and can ignore the rules. But the paladin is still a human being, not a god. He will one day grow old, and his strength will decline. The more unscrupulous he is now, when his force can no longer deter everyone, he will be liquidated. Of course, this day is still very far away, and Colin must face the current thorny problems. Just as Colin was thinking hard about countermeasures, the carriage suddenly stopped. Bachelor Don opened the curtain and was about to ask what happened when he heard the accompanying guard report, Miss Vera, there is a mage blocking our way in front of us. Mage. Vera heard the words and immediately got in. After getting out of the carriage, he saw an old man wearing a silver robe standing in the middle of the road, looking at him with a smile. Mr. Ernest, Vera shouted in surprise and immediately prepared to greet him, but just after taking a few steps, she found that her hand was being held by Colin behind her. That's the Speaker of the Evil Master Council. Vera turned around and explained, don't worry, nothing will happen. Well, then be careful. Colin then let go of his hand. However, he took a few steps forward, keeping a sprinting distance while also giving the other party enough privacy. Ernest chatted with Vera for about a quarter of an hour, then nodded to Colin, turned around, and disappeared into the night. What did he say to you? Colin asked immediately after returning to the car. Lord Ernest heard about Prince Lehi's desire to declare war on Jewel, so he wanted to meet with Emperor Reinhard to seek a peaceful solution. Then why didn't he use formal diplomatic channels? And I want to come to you. He said that he had submitted his credentials but received no response at all, so he came to me, hoping to tell His Majesty the Emperor through me. What else did he say? He said Jewel did not want to be an enemy of the Empire, and what Mr. Jin did in the north was all personal behavior and did not get the consent of the Mages' Council. The Mages' Council would never tolerate the forbidden curse of sacrificing civilians to appear in the world again. No more. No more. Colin shook his head slightly, a little disappointed with the Speaker of the Mage Council. After submitting your credentials, Emperor Reinhard is unwilling to see you. Could it be that by sending a message through Vera, His Majesty will meet you? Moreover, what was said was completely unimportant. If Colin were Emperor Reinhard, he would not be moved by these words. What's more, the key figure in the current political situation in the imperial capital is not Emperor Reinhard at all. Didn't you see that the Emperor was forced to pretend to be ill? Instead of going to Emperor Reinhardt, it would be better to go directly to Prince Leahy to discuss terms. Colin sighed secretly. It seems that Jewel can't be relied on either. Not long after, the carriage arrived at the Phoenix Palace smoothly. Arriving in front of the side hall where he lived, Colin helped Vera get out of the car and then said goodbye to Bachelor Don. As soon as he entered the door, Colin smelled a familiar fragrance. When he raised his head, he saw Queen Midla leaning on the sofa and looking at them with a smile. "Vera, Colin, I've been waiting for you for a long time." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 301. Queen Midla sunk her body into the soft sofa, smiling with her pretty red lips, holding her chest with one hand and supporting her chin with the other. Her golden hair was casually draped over her shoulders like the midday sun, and her slender, snow-white calves were gently swaying under the red skirt. She had a lazy attitude and a charming look. Unfortunately, Colin was not in the mood to appreciate the beautiful picture in front of him at this time. There was even a strong dissatisfaction rising in his heart. It was obviously Emperor Reinhardt who caused the trouble, but he was constantly running around trying to win the support of big bosses from all sides, while you and your wife were just pretending to be sick. A heartless show-off. "And, are you waiting for us?" Yes. Queen Midla sat up straight and smiled. "Looking at you, you know that Consul Latham. Is there any news of his death?" Vera glanced at Colin, and seeing his gloomy face, she nodded and said, "Yes, we just had dinner at the Archon's house in Crete and heard the news." "Auntie, why do you look like this?" "Not worried at all." "What's there to worry about?" Queen Midla smiled sweetly. "It's you who are messing around with this matter." "Hey, didn't I tell you from the beginning? In the Phoenix Palace, just wait with peace of mind. When the time comes, Vera will naturally inherit the position of Duke of the North. And, Prince Leahy is going to launch a war against Jewel, so how can I wait here with peace of mind?" "Then you have been struggling for a few days, have you gotten any good results?" Faced with Queen Midla's rhetorical question, Vera suddenly felt depressed, lowered her head, and stopped talking. Colin took over the conversation at this time and asked in a deep voice, "Your Majesty the Queen, do you already have a solution?" Queen Midla smiled charmingly but did not answer Colin's question but said, "Latham is in power. The official's death is unclear, and at such a critical and sensitive moment, the Senate will not let it go. Some people will definitely pay the price for this." Colin looked at the confident Queen Midla, and reluctantly, he couldn't help but blurt out, "Are you so sure that the Senate can catch the real murderer?" "Of course," Queen Midla replied without hesitation. Colin's brows furrowed tightly. He was about to say, with Prince Leahy's strength, that killing an aging consul would leave any traces. But then he realized that this was just a game. Queen Midla is so confident that there is only one possibility: frame her. Colin found that he had been misled all along. Prince Leahy had indeed benefited the most from the death of Consul Latham, so he took it for granted that it was Prince Leahy who killed him. Moreover, Prince Leahy did have the strength to kill a consul without anyone noticing. However, Queen Midla's attitude now made Colin realize that Consul Latham may not have been killed by Prince Leahy. It could also be the Queen. No, it should be a trap set by Emperor Reinhardt and his family for Prince Leahy. Colin didn't know what they did to Archon Latham's body so that Prince Leahy could not escape the suspicion of murder. But judging from the look on Queen Midla's face, they must be confident enough to keep Prince Leahy speechless. As long as Prince Leahy is accused of killing a consul, he will definitely become a public enemy of the nobles. Even if no one dares to execute a paladin for such a crime, Prince Leahy has alienated everyone and completely lost his appeal. It is estimated that he will only become a wandering knight from now on. As a result, the proposal to declare war on the mage naturally died. Moreover, through this matter, the Emperor also got rid of the biggest obstacle to his control of the Empire. From now on, Yulong City will truly be under the absolute control of Emperor Reinhardt. Looking at Colin's changing expression, Queen Midla seemed to see through what he was thinking. She quietly stood up, came to Colin, and said calmly, "Now you should understand why I reminded you not to mess around at the welcome banquet, right?" At this time, the charming look on Queen Midla's face has disappeared, replaced by an awe-inspiring dignity, demonstrating the authority that an imperial queen should have. Of course, Colin understood. It turns out that this proposal to declare war was a trap from beginning to end, just to weave a motive for killing Prince Lehigh. As for whether the proposal would pass, Queen Midla had not cared about it from the beginning. It's ridiculous that Colin and Vera were still kept in the dark and were running around trying to be smart. What's even more ridiculous is that Colin was almost successful. With the support of the elders of the Western region and the delay of Consul Latam, Vera could remotely put pressure on the elders of the Northern region through Marquis Garcia. Let them vote against the proposal despite Archon Sabaz's request. Who would have thought that at the last moment, it would be his own allies who would nip Colin and others' plans in the bud? No, not an ally. Colin once thought that he was an ally with the Emperor and Empress, but he didn't expect that they didn't take him seriously at all. Just wait with peace of mind. Don't mess around. Colin and Vera's efforts in the past few days are nothing but a joke in each other's eyes. Even if they are close to achieving their goals are not the goals of the Emperor and Empress, and their efforts can also be wiped out by the Emperor and Empress at will. Queen Midla looked at Colin expressionlessly and said coldly, "Perhaps we had some misunderstandings in Silvermoon City before, and you lacked the necessary trust in me. But I don't want this to happen again, otherwise." Queen Midla did not continue speaking, but her stern eyes made her meaning very clear. Seeing this, Vera quickly stepped forward to persuade her, "Auntie, we also want to help this time. It's not that we don't believe you." Colin suppressed the anger in his heart, lowered his head, and said respectfully, "Your Highness, I know that this time I was reckless and almost ruined your plan. I sincerely apologize to you. As for the misunderstanding you mentioned about Silvermoon City, I assure you that there is no such thing at all. I have nothing but infinite respect and trust for you." That's the best. A charming smile finally appeared on Queen Midla's face again. "Kellen, you are a smart man and a capable person. With you assisting Vera in guarding the North, Your Majesty, you and I are at ease. So, don't do stupid things again, otherwise, Vera will be the Lord of the North." This sentence is very serious. Colin and Vera could only bow their heads and endure it. The authority of the Queen of the Empire was fully demonstrated at this moment. "Okay, you guys should go to bed early. There will be a good show to watch tomorrow." After saying this, Queen Midla swayed her waist lightly and walked out gracefully. Vera thought of something and suddenly shouted from behind, "Auntie, we met Mr. Ernest, the Speaker of the Mages' Council. On the way back he said he wanted to see His Majesty." But Queen Midla didn't look back. And coldly said, "Haha, he is just an idiot who was immersed in arcane research and made himself stupid. He still wants to see His Majesty." Before he finished speaking, Meoman's figure had disappeared into the night. "Kellen, it seems that Aunt is really angry." Vera held Colin's hand with some anxiety and said softly, "Don't worry, we didn't cause any trouble. Your aunt just gave us a lesson," Colin comforted with a smile. Vera nodded and said, "Then let's ask my aunt for her opinion first on what we do in the future, and don't question her decision anymore." "Okay," Colin agreed with a smile, looking into her eyes. Dangerous light lurks quietly. How could he possibly endure such contempt from Queen Midla? Especially the other party's words, "Vera is not the master of the North," made Colin realize that what Queen Midla wanted was just an obedient North. As for who should be the master of the North, she might really not give a damn about it. Vera can do it, and so can Joyce. This gave Colin a deep sense of crisis. End of chapter. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 302. After passing through the corridor, Queen Midla returned to the palace. The faint sound of prayer came from the palace, rippling with soothing power. Your Highness the Queen. The maids in front of the palace gate all leaned over to salute. Is His Majesty Gregory performing healing spells on His Majesty? Yes. Queen Midla nodded and stood quietly outside the palace. After the prayers in the palace stopped, she walked in again. The white gold holy light has not completely dissipated, casting a sacred and bright color on the palace. Your Majesty, are you feeling better? Queen Midla walked quickly and came to the bed. At this time, Emperor Reinhard was leaning on the bed, his face pale and his expression sluggish, not at all what a powerful 6th-level knight should be. Thanks to Your Majesty Gregory, I can feel that my body is slowly recovering. His tone also seemed weak, as if a gust of wind could blow it away. Your Majesty, you are so polite. This is mainly due to the brilliance of our Lord Pope Gregory said with a smile. The Pope of the glorious church was standing in front of the Emperor's bed, holding a white scepter in his hand and wearing a crown of thorns. His eyes were small, and because he was always smiling, others could not see the changes in his eyes at all. Praise our Lord. May His glory last forever, Queen Midla praised, and then asked, Your Majesty Gregory, has the cause of Your Majesty's illness been found? The Pope's brows suddenly frowned and he sighed. Your Majesty must have been poisoned, but, I have never seen this kind of poison before, so the treatment process is so slow. A trace of disappointment flashed across Queen Midra's face, and then she thanked her again and again. Send the Pope out of the palace. When only the husband and wife were left in the palace, Emperor Reinhard suddenly smiled and said, Do you think that when this old guy was helping me to treat him, would he deliberately miss it and let me die from the poison? Queen La curled her lips and said, Gregory will not let you die in his hands, and he is more concerned about whether you are really poisoned. Of course, I am really poisoned, cough cough. Emperor Reinhard coughed a few times, looked at the Queen with a scrutinizing gaze, and asked, I'm really curious, where did you find this poison? And even Gregory recognized it, not coming out. Queen Midra smiled lightly but did not answer the Emperor's question. Instead, she said, Will you attend the funeral tomorrow? Of course, Emperor Reinhard said without hesitation, with a look in his eyes shining with a sinister light, I want to see my good uncle's reputation be discredited and betrayed by everyone. Then you should go to bed early and recuperate. Queen Midla confessed casually and prepared to get up and leave. Wait, Emperor Reinhard stopped her. Queen Midla turned back and looked at her husband with some impatience. Although she didn't say anything, her eyes were very clear. What else do you want? Facing his wife's somewhat rude look, Emperor Reinhard was not angry, but asked with a smile. I heard that the two little guys from the north have really made some great achievements. If it weren't for us, haha, maybe they have been able to prevent the proposal from passing the Senate. Queen Midla smiled disdainfully and said, the two whimsical little guys are just trying to be smart. They don't know how deep the water in the Senate is, so they have that kind of childish thoughts. Don't worry, I've taught them a lesson, and similar things won't happen again. Emperor Reinhard nodded, and then asked, so you still insist on letting Vera inherit the title of Duke of the North? Yes. But you have also seen that Vera is not an easy character to control. Why not choose Joyce? Queen Midla snorted and said, Joyce is indeed easy be controlled, but we may not be the ones controlling him then. Don't forget the lessons of the East. Do you want the North to fall under the control of the Church? Joyce is only 10 years old. Wait until he reaches adulthood. There are still 8 years left. Let's not say whether he will continue to have a good impression of Archbishop Ajani after such a long time. Even if he really marries her, I will still be sure to deal with this woman. But Vera, haha, my brother has chosen a good husband for her. Are you worried about Colin Angelet? Queen Midla narrowed her eyes, looking thoughtful. Yes, Emperor Reinhard nodded and said solemnly, this Northern Knight, I can't see through it. Many times he faced extremely bad situations, but he was able to resolve them without any danger, and some of the methods used, even I don't understand. Queen Midla was silent for a moment, and then said, I understand your concerns, but Colin can be won over. Are you sure? Sure. Based on the story he told our son back in Silvermoon City. Queen Midla nodded firmly. However, Emperor Reinhard was not infected by his wife's confidence. He curled his lips, shook his head, and said, do you want to hear my opinion? Queen Midla did not speak, as if she didn't want to hear it, but she didn't either. Move your feet. Emperor Reinhard smiled slightly and continued, I think we can push Joyce to the position of Duke of the North, and then let him get engaged to Judy. No, Queen Midla heard herself after his daughter's name, he immediately interrupted. Why not? Emperor Reinhard's face instantly darkened. Queen Mitra said one word at a time, I will not let my daughter become a victim of politics. Marrying Joyce is a sacrifice. No, it has nothing to do with Joyce. Queen Mitra looked at her flashing, all marriages that cannot be decided by oneself are tragedies, and of course they are sacrifices. Emperor Reinhard seemed to be angry and laughed, and asked, so, our marriage is also a tragedy? Midday Queen Law looked into her husband's eyes coldly, and after a while, she said calmly. Isn't it? Emperor Reinhard's breath suddenly became rapid, and an unnatural blush appeared on his face. He stared intently. Looking at his wife, his eyes were full of anger, unwillingness, and naked possessiveness. Queen Midla stood there expressionless, as if she had turned a blind eye to her husband's gaffe. It wasn't until the husband calmed down a little that she spoke again. Your Majesty, don't forget our common ambition. That is what is truly valuable, is the goal worth pursuing and achieving in our lives. Instead of being immersed in the boring love between men and women, struggling with whether I love you or not. You are right, my Queen. Reinhard the Emperor seemed to have finally calmed down and said in a calm tone, since you think you can control Colin, you'd better prove it to me. What I don't want is just a light word. Okay, Queen Midla. He nodded slightly, then turned and left. Emperor Reinhard stared at the other person's graceful back that was gradually retreating, with complicated eyes. End of chapter.